where you are. Welcome to North Sales Moth webinar. Thanks everyone for joining. I know it's very tricky times around the world, and we're each facing our different challenges. You know, we're really, North Sales is doing this to sort of try to keep some sort of sailing flow ticking along whilst we're all sat at home. I think, this is week one. We've really only had a week or a few days to prepare this, so we're not going to be, that sharp just yet. Thank you to everyone, the guests who have joined us this week at quite late notice. Bear with us, and we'll see how we go. I think, the plan for this in the future, which I probably didn't get across well enough, was the agenda of each webinar. And I think it's going to be very hard just to have a completely interactive free flow of chat, because the topics would get get pretty wild. So we're going to try to keep the topics quite narrow, quite a narrow topic range each week. I'll try to get them out ahead of time for next week, and that way we can get early questions in on that topic early on. But just moving on to what we've got going on here today for the next hour, and we'll go from there. So we're lucky enough to have with us Luca from Mcdermott Foils. We'll come to him in a moment. He's going to talk to us about foil design, where he's got to with foil evolution, and what's next. We're then going to go to Graham Sutherland, New Zealand Moth sailor. He just won the Moth Nationals. He's going to give us an update on the state of the Moth class in New Zealand, and what we can expect from the New Zealand Moth fleet in the future. We've got the big man Kyle online as well. He's going to give us an update on the forthcoming World Championship in the UK. So we look forward to hearing that. And then we're also very lucky to have recent JJ winner David Mcdermott here. He's the director at Mackay Boats. So we're going to ask him some questions about winning the JJ, but then more importantly, we're going to talk to him about the Beaker Moth, the developments there, what's been going on, and what's going to come out of that factory when it reopens in a few weeks. So anyway, why don't we move over to Luca now? He's sat there in his factory in Sydney, and he's going to talk to us about his moth foils, where he's got to with design, and what's coming next. So over to you, Luca, and please speak away, then I'll shoot you some questions.
Sure, sounds good. Thanks very much, Rob, and thanks North Sales for putting this on. I think it's a fantastic idea. Yeah, look, we're still ticking along in these times, and still making foils, still have plenty of orders, which is really good. So we haven't slowed down in any way. And but yeah, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I think people might have seen a few bits and pieces of information on Mothcast and website and whatnot, but this is a bit of a look into the workshop as well, and how it all comes together. I mean, I've worked with a manufacturing partner in Australia that makes the foils, and then they send me the blanks to obviously my design. All the tooling is mine, and then I do the fit off and physically do it myself. And in my home garage, we're just about to actually move into bigger premises as a business, so that's kind of nice. So this will be kind of sort of a temporary setup, but I'll give you a bit of a tour into the excuse the rain. This is the sort of Mcdermott design headquarters. I'll move that lamp so you can see a bit better. And this is where all the magic happens. There's always a few foils on the go. Got a few on the rack that are sort of mid-production. For Ian Jensen that I'm doing right now, and also Tom Burton. Quick look at the a few verticals that are going out the door at the moment as well. This is a Mark II vertical that's being put together here for a Japanese sailor, and we've got a in the back exocet vertical as well, which has got a different head on it now, a product. So that's sort of the latest in terms of development. And yeah, you know, it's for us, the finish is very important. It's always trying to push the limits of materials and what we can do.
She was such a very, very special lady, not just to me, to many, many people. And here is an opportunity to hear and see. I know it sounds strange. And then we have somewhere you actually get the attention.
Have we lost you, Luca?
I do. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Luca, are you there? There we go. Not sure who that is. Luca, I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. Just bear with us, everybody, for 2 seconds.
Okay, looks like we've lost Luca. Rob?
Yeah, fair enough. All right. Well, let's just come back to Luca in a short while. In the meantime, Graham, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, Graham. Well, yeah, I can hear you. I presume everyone else can. You know, sorry, we're going to jump to you a bit quicker here. Why don't you tell us a bit about what's going on in New Zealand with the Moth fleet over there? I know you've just had your Moth Nationals.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I guess last weekend we had our Moth Nationals. 22 boats entered, which is probably the biggest fleet size we've seen for a while. Obviously, amid COVID-19 sort of lockdowns about happening and whatnot, so that was quite interesting times for regatta. The venue was Kowal Bay, which is basically a big lake. It's obviously on the ocean. It's about an hour's north of Auckland, sort of surrounded by land, some salt water, but it's a big flat water venue with generally pretty good breeze. So yeah, we managed to get sort of 2 days of racing with 22 boats, a big spread of the fleet. We sort of had five or so guys from the Sail GP sort of team, 5 or so guys who sort of went to the Worlds, about 5 or so guys from the sort of youth match racing kind of scene who just sort of got recently, and then other sort of few stragglers like we had some Ruffles who got 2 boats, so his boat was there. Some other private boats that joined in. So we ended up quite a decent fleet in New Zealand standards, which was great to see.
Good. I'm just looking at the results here on my screen. It looks like you had a pretty convincing win.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was going pretty quick. I took some risks on the first day with my sort of foil setup. I went the Swift small and some quite marginal foiling conditions, and just sort of looked for the power through my rig. Made sure I kept the boat moving quick most of the time, and that sort of paid off. Apart from race 4, which it was I did 2 laps actually, so that's my Grand Prix finish. I got 8th in that one, but both sort of day 1 and day 2 I ran the Swift small, and I sort of went a little bit conservative on day 2. We had a bit more breeze, and I still ran the large Beaker rubber, which was pretty good across the range. So
Good. And tell me, what would you say the sort of split up of boats is in New Zealand right now in terms of brand, Beaker, Mach2, Exocet?
Well, we actually had 4 beakers at this regatta, which was quite nice to see, being New Zealand boat. So, you know, they were definitely, Sam and Alex. I mean, there was 3 of us that went to the Worlds, so, you know, they were definitely at the front of the fleet. But the Mark II has always had a strong, following. They're quite well updated here. You know, most of them are running, pretty new kit comparative. I mean, only one boat with the wing parts, but everybody else is, looking pretty nice. So mostly just Mark IIs. There was 2 modified Blade Riders here as well. So there's a range of boats, but mostly Mark IIs.
Yeah, good. So you'd say that obviously the fleet's on the build there. I know that there'd been a big wasp push in New Zealand and quite a big fleet of wasps in New Zealand. But 22 moths is very promising. And what are you seeing? You think you're going to get a bit more growth? What's the vibe?
Yeah, well, I hope so. I mean, I always look at the wasp fleet as somewhere that growth might come from, as people grow out of that sort of one design mentality and see the opportunity to develop and tinker and push along with making the boats easier and faster and whatnot. So hopefully some of that filters up to us. I took one of the Wasp National Champion sale a couple of weeks ago, and it's definitely his intention to move on from the Wasp into a Moth in the near future, which is good to see.
Good. And so venues in New Zealand suitable for Moth. You mentioned you were up north about an hour from Auckland, which sounds very reasonable. But what was it like there? Could you put 100 moths there?
Yeah, it's quite. If you Google map Kowal Island, you'll see sort of Kowal Bay, which is it's quite a big venue. Manly Sailing Club, where we had a nationals last year, was pretty good also. It's quite well sheltered in a lot of directions. It does cop a big nor'easterly, but every other direction is very good at Manly, and obviously Russell's pretty pro foiling at Manly Sailing Club. So these 2 clubs have had the nationals the past 3 years. But foiling week is up in the Bay of Islands, which is also quite a big sheltered bay. So I mean, there are a few venues with sort of open water, which is quite sheltered from the big ocean, and also quite consistent breezes, which is nice, with easy sort of launching. This is, I guess, I'm biased to this venue because it's my home venue, but it has been a great place to foil, and even Russell said on the weekend, what a great place to foil out here at Kowal Bay. So I'm biased to this one, but there are Auckland itself. I guess, as we'll find out when the cup comes, that you can sort of always move around depending on the conditions to find the best venue. But there's no real one venue in the CBD itself which is perfect for moth sailing. Yeah,
got you. So, I would love to see a Moth Worlds or a big Moth event in New Zealand at some stage. What are you thinking would be the spot for that then? Manly?
Yeah, well, Manly, we actually did put together a bit of a bid for one of the Worlds here, but we had a few hurdles locally just with Manly Club hosting World events. They definitely have probably more of the resources to run it, and the venues, I'd say, suitable. 80 to 90% of the time, it's quite a good venue. Up here there's definitely plenty of room up here. There's no traffic, no, plenty of room, but we would have to get some resources to run the event from somewhere else. But either these 2 places would be quite a good place for a regatta, and there's a lot of chat about having a regatta around America's Cup when some of the teams bring their own boats down here and whatnot, which would be quite a good way to sort of trial something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazingly, it's very soon, the America's Cup suddenly, isn't it? It's right around the corner. But quite possibly, I mean, I'm sure we could get a container of boats over from Sydney very easily. I imagine we could get 20 over. People would come over and do a regatta over there for sure.
Yeah, coming from Sydney is pretty easy for us, for you guys. It's not far to fly, not far to ship, and shipping and air freight actually isn't, too much different if you're doing a one-off. But if you're doing a bulk container, it would be quite affordable, I would have thought.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, so it sounds like New Zealand fleet's strong and building, and hopefully
in a building phase, I reckon. The one thing I would say about the Nationals, which I sort of didn't mention, we did a couple of things different around the rules. We sort of, I think we're sailing fast boats now. Fast boat rules should sort of apply. We sort of took away the hitting the mark rule, and we also changed. We tried to encourage people to take a penalty if there was any kind of incidents. We didn't have any, but we went for 2 tacks upwind and 2 jibes downwind for penalties. And we definitely, the other thing we were looking at was what to do about zones and coming into marks, just to try and make it safe and easy to manage on the water.
Yeah, that sounds good, Graham. There was certainly a lot of chat at the World Championship in Perth about the rules, and I think a lot of our rules in sailing are still based around slower boats, and actually it's not often the length of the boat that's important, but it's actually the speed of it, and even that comes down to the length of the start line. Where traditionally it's 1.5 times the length of the boat is the length of the start line, or 1.5 times the length of the boat multiplied by the number of boats. But when you're doing 25 knots down the start line, 200 or 300 meters simply isn't long enough. But I'd definitely be, what I'd like to talk about in the next few weeks on this webinar is proposed or experimental rules for the Moth class. And I think, as you say, that penalty is a tricky one. How do you make the penalty not too aggressive for minor infractions? Obviously, I think hitting a mark, has to be acceptable, because especially in the Moth, you don't really want to hit a mark. You're likely to break your boat. And then I think the real tricky one to broach is the mark zone and room at a mark, where a 3 boat length circle is obviously way too small for us, but making a 20 boat length circle is obviously very hard to judge, and then makes the leeward gate very big. So I think there's there'll be a lot of opinion and a lot of room for discussion on proposed, sailing rule changes for the Moth class. But that's definitely something we want to get to at some stage. All right, and Graham, tell us a bit, whilst you're here, about sailing the beaker boat. We're going to come to Dave Mackay in a bit, but you're back in the class with a new beaker. Your first main event was the World Championship, where you did well. I think you were in the top 15 or 12th or something like that. Tell us a bit about sailing the beaker.
Yeah, I mean, I ended up 13th the world, which was a lot better than I expected. And I did put a bit of time into, had to put a bit of time into sailing the boat. I guess I was one of the earlier adopters. And James Gell is a school friend of mine, and I guess I took a leap of faith with him, early on to get into a boat. And there were definitely some setup issues in the early days around the just the setup system, the control systems. But yeah, it was very rewarding to see it all come together in time for the Worlds. I must admit, it was very, very rewarding. And I was very, stoked for James Gell and Mackay's for jumping in there and supporting him, and it was great to see. The beaker boat itself is in some ways a very hard boat to sail. In other ways, it's a lot easier. Longer verticals. I'm sure Luca will tell you different about power and whatnot, but it is a very powerful setup. You're a lot higher. You've got a lot more stored moment, I guess, which can work for you and against you in different situations. And longer, thinner verticals, super quick, but also can be super sensitive. So I end up sailing, a lot more, turning a lot more with heel angle than any sort of helm movement. And in lighter breezes, you got to stay a bit more upright. It's easy to get caught too far to weather. But yeah, I mean, it's very forgiving in the waves. You can just dial it down a bit and go straight to the bottom mark. And upwind, I mean, riding moments, you're freeing upwind, you get it heeled over and you're off. It was very noticeable, the beaker boats, Nationals, the upwind pace. So yeah, very happy.
No, good and well done. One thing for sure is, there's, all the beakers would perform very well, and you can see upwind, clearly they're benefiting from either the low aero drag or the long verticals. I know there's a lot of debate over long verticals, when they're good and when they're not good. We'll leave that for another day. But Graham, thank you very much. I can see Luca back on here now. I think, maybe the sun's come out, so his solar battery on his camera is working. And Luca, can you hear us? And we'll come back to you.
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes, mate. Yeah, sorry, we lost you. I don't quite know what happened, but we'll just come. We just had a bit with Graham there on the New Zealand fleet, which was very informative. Let us know what's going on in New Zealand, and it sounds like he's going to organise a big event for us to do there within the next year. So stand by for the notice of race on that one. And we'll come back to Foil World then, Luca. And, I don't know when it got broken for everybody, but, why don't we talk us through your, let's go back to the beginning and talk us through your sort of design process and why you started designing Moth foils and how you got to where you've got to now.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sorry about that. I think it was the laptop internet Wi-Fi didn't work in the man cave. It was a bit too far from the router, so you're on my phone. Hope it's not too wobbly for you, but I'm just sort of holding it up. But yeah, look, it all started in, I joined the Moth class in 2004, and I was part of the early experimental period. Like there's a lot of guys building a lot of foils that didn't work, and we were learning a lot of lessons and trying to figure out where it was all going to go. And with a design background, I always liked experimentation and built my own boats and sort of went on from there. And it really all started, I guess, in 2012, where I designed a foil with David Lister, which was the Mesita. It was meant to be a bit of a side business to my full-time job. And that's when, this current company started, essentially. We designed the foil together. Didn't really have a builder to make it. Didn't really want to do it ourselves because we're working full time, and building foils in our spare, Saturdays and Sundays wasn't that appealing. So it wasn't a very organized start, but we had a good product, and Bora won the 2013 World Championships with it. And I think that was the first production foil with fixed tips, with a fixed flap. It had a lot of ideas that I think sort of carried on up over the years. The section shape was different, and I think that they're still the sections we're using today, particularly on the Swift Small. It's the identical section to the Mesita. So there's a lot of good stuff that came out of that foil. And there was a lot of
sorry, Lucas. So the Swift Small is the same section as the Mesita?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Copy. Okay, sorry, you carry on, yeah.
Yeah, so the large is a different section. It's a slightly higher percentage section, being a light wind foil. But the small is essentially same section as Mesita, but it's a different chord, different thickness, obviously very different area and different philosophy, and things have sort of moved on. But, to answer your question about my approach, it's a combination of practical and theoretical approach. I work closely with Cambridge University, who does a lot of my testing, and the way that relationship works is that I pass on computer models to my contact there, who then passes them on to the students to use that as a thesis for their final year. So they basically do a study of whatever I might need. So I did a study, for example, on a Swift anhedral versus a Swift standard sort of flat foil to see if there's any benefits in theoretical sense of going to anhedral. And then those results would come back to me, and that would sort of guide me a little bit in terms of my design. You've got to take those things with a grain of salt, but there is some benefit in terms of, you know, drag numbers and areas and lift and all that sort of thing. So that's kind of how it starts. I guess some basic parameters that are set by those tests. And then overwhelmingly, I experiment and I take a bit of probably more of a hands-on approach than a lot of people do. I think it's quite similar to sail development and kind of what you've been doing with the North Sails, Rob, you know, where you might start with a design on the computer that's evolved over many generations, and then you rig the sail up on the mast and you see really how it performs and what needs tweaking and trying to get the deck sweeper right and whatnot. So my approach is similar, where I might build a model fairly quickly, you know, like a prototype, use it, get some practical feedback and see how that, if I want to change anything before I go into production. So the Swift Small, for example, is now in 3rd generation of the foil. Generation 1 was actually a smaller foil that Filippo Ligaria built for me for 2018 Nationals, where I got 5th. I think I might have won a race. And the speed of the early Swift was fairly apparent, but it was very small foil, and it just didn't really work off the line where I needed to have a high mode, high lane. You needed to sort of sail your own DMG numbers, and I felt that it had, you know, awesome speed downwind, but it was a little bit compromised upwind. So I ended up increasing the size for the production version, and that's how my development works. Is I'll test it, and then I make changes before I go into production.
Yeah, so I, you know, certainly at the Garda Worlds is when I guess you were there, you did, I don't know where you came overall, but probably just outside the top 10 or just in the top 10, but you certainly won some races or had some very good results in the Gold Fleet. And that's when I was sort of first alerted to the Swift Small. The worry always was that, for me, that it was a bit of a high range foil, but it's amazing what we've seen recently, how the range of the foils really come down, and whether, presumably that's through everybody just getting better at sailing lower down the range with smaller foils, and you know, and learning how to do that better. What you know, just setting up your Swift Small then, you know, when you're doing a dock setup on the day, what are you looking at? Before you launch with it, what are you trying to do? Angle of attack, where you're setting the tab and all that sort of thing. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, look, very quickly in terms of the size, yeah, absolutely. You know, when I designed the range, both the Swift Small and the Large were designed to try to be where the class would be in a year time. So I designed both those foils undersized, knowing that the class would obviously get quicker, the boats would get quicker, and the foils would come into their own. So the Small was designed as a smaller Small, and it might still be. I'm not sure if Cookie's one is smaller. And the Large was the smallest Large available at the time as well, slightly smaller than the Exocet foil. So yeah, it's amazing how things change and how the ranges change for these foils. But yeah, in terms of how I go about, sorry, what was the question again, Rob? I missed it again. So
just when you're on the beach and you're about to go out. Set up. Yeah, just what you do. Tell us what angle of attack, which is obviously not something you're doing on launch, but I know a lot of people want to know, which I often get, is where do I put my ride height adjuster before I go out?
Yeah, sorry, just got lost in my train of thought. But look, what I do, the first thing is I always try to set the angle of attack on the centerboard and rudder in the correct positions. I think there's too many variables in a Moth, so you can get very easily lost with feedback from different controls that give you the same sensation. So you might, if you're flying out, it could be because you've got too much ride height on, or it could be because you've got too much angle of attack on, or it could be because you've got too much stuff on the rudder. or negative angle of attack on the rudder, or you could be sitting too far back. You know, so there's quite a few different causes to the same problem. So I think the most important thing that I do is I always tell people set up the angle of attack correctly. And it varies between boats. The beaker guys have done a good job now where the foils go straight onto the beakers and they are good to go out of the box because they're very accurate with their angle setup. Same with the Exocet. Salman's, you know, very consistent with his numbers. The Mark IIs tend to be all over the place a little bit with where that centerboard sits once you put it on. But it can be adjusted. So the first thing, yeah, boat goes upside down. I'll show this little template is what I use. This gets supplied with all the foils. This is a rudder template. And that gets slipped over the centerboard. Centerboard gets pinned in the boat. Controls are not on at this stage. And I will zero in what I think is a shear line on most boats, which is around, you know, position of the centerboard case roughly on most boats. And then I'll just check to see what angle I've got. And I'm looking for 1 degree angle of attack on the Swift range of foils, plus minus half degree. And then I'll also set up the rudder at the same time. And the Swift rudder works in a -1 degree range for downwind, which gives us the least amount of drag for that section. And then we're looking at 0 degrees or half a degree positive upwind, depending on sort of your weight. So that's the basic setup, is setting up the angle of attack. After that, I'll move into things like gearing, you know, which is obviously adjustable on a lot of these boats, but with the Swift Large being a fixed tip foil, it requires a little bit more gearing, a little bit more aggressive setup to be able to give you the control, because you'll lose control when you fix the tips because half the flap is essentially not moving anymore. That setup to me, you know, I like to have a fair bit of flap down at takeoff. So my one stays submerged when it's fully retracted back, if you know what I mean. Like when it's fully in the back position, I would have my one submerged by maybe 10, 15 centimeters. So it gets a fair bit of flap down at that sort of takeoff speed. It's good for foil jibing, tacking, and also wave sailing, because when you have a lot of flap down, you don't sort of spear into the next wave. So that's roughly where I would, you know, so fairly aggressive gearing is what I run. But, you know, a lot of people do different things and it works for them too. And then in terms of your neutral position, I set that back about 30 degrees off the vertical. That's roughly where I would have my neutral position. So once I've got the angle of attack, the gearing and the neutral position, I know I'm in the ballpark. And then the last thing I do, which I'm quite keen on, is a very accurate rudder setting. I don't just use the pin as the guide. I've actually suggested you rig up a rope system that goes around your pin pivot, which is your pin. So it's basically a 4-to-1 system on a shock cord, which gives me 4 times more feedback on the setting. So let's say if your pin moves 2 or 3 millimeters, which is significant in angle change, if it's a 4-to-1 rope system that goes around the pin with a little setting, you know, where it is, the 3 mil movement is going to be 12 mil, which I can tell. So, you know, the point is that when you look back at the rudder gantry and the pin, it's very difficult to tell a 2 mil movement, whether you can tell an 8 mil movement on this dial. So that gives me a more accurate location of the rudder settings. And then I can put that rudder into exactly where I want. So for downwind, you know, I will be at -1 and not -half because I can't see where it is.
Got you. So you're really playing with, you know, you're knowing exactly the degree changes you're doing on that rudder change with your string pot repeater on a 1 to 4 system. I mean, I would say 99%, maybe 99.9% of the fleet just do it on feel. But you know, you're the foil designer, you know, and you want to know accurately where that is, and it makes a lot of sense. You know, you're trying to pick up. You know, we spend hours setting our angle of attack on our main foil, but then if we're not exactly sure on essentially the how the trim of the boat, the 4.5 trim of the boat, we you know, that angle of attack is getting thrown out very quickly. And then, as you know, from an aero point of view, if you start sailing around with your bow down, you're essentially losing mast rake as well, so you're losing aero gains off the top of the rig. So that's all pretty interesting. I mean, one thing I do on my Swift Small is on a windy day, when I'm on the beach before I go and my wand's right forward, I make sure that my tab is right up, and I think that's a good starting point. That you know, if you know it's going to be windy and you're going to want to get rid of some lift at times, when your wand's right forward on the beach, make sure your tab is getting very, very close to its stop at the top, just to make sure that you don't come flying out the water too often. Now, Luca, just whilst we're still on the Swift Small, let's. I pulled off your website. We'll come back to those tips. If you can see my screen here, your selection guide on your website. As I spoke to you sort of a couple of days ago about it, I think it probably needs updating, and as we've sort of talked about recently as well. I've taken the 75 to 85 kilo range here. Talk us through body weight and using the Swift Small, and when you would advise to use it and when not.
Yeah, look, this was written when we launched the foil, and it was on the back of the early testing, but it's proven that lighter sailors can actually push that range even more. So yeah, you're dead right. I mean, it's not the Swift Small. It says here from 12 knots onwards. I would say 9 knots onwards is more accurate nowadays. This is, you know, and since that guide was written, there's deck sweepers have become more prominent and people are just hitting high numbers. So because of that, the foils are working at a lower wind speed because the boats are going quicker through the water. So yeah, absolutely. You know, 9+ knots. We're finding with the Swift Small that it was never really designed as a foil that was meant to work in sort of 9-10 knots. But it just happens to work quite well because of the flaps design as well. So we've been able to have a bit of a game where we get a lot of lift early because of our flap design, where the foil area still remains quite small. So you're not really penalised for that early takeoff, and it's produced a fairly competitive design all around. But yeah, in terms of the changeover, you know, we still think that the Swift Large is the foil to have when you really want early lift. And in those live conditions where you can't really get takeoff when you need, you know, it's upwind height is critical as well, and foil area is the key to that. So I would still, you know, have 2 foils and then change over. You know, I'm 95 kilos, so I'll probably change over at about 12-13 knots for my weight. But
Yeah.
guys like T, you know, they're changing over as little as 11 knots.
Yeah, sure. I mean, certainly double figures, and we're into the Swift Small, I think. Sorry.
Hey, Rob.
Yeah.
Getting a few questions from people asking a few questions to have Luca talk about the construction of the foils, and also a couple of close-up images of his foils, if we can.
Yeah, Luca, did you hear all that?
Yes, I did. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So, talk us through who builds them for you, and then maybe you can zoom in. And I'd like you also maybe just tell us why you've got different tips on these 2 foils, your big and your small foil. But do the construction one.
Yeah, look, construction of the foils is solid carbon. So we did this with Masita years ago, and we felt that there's so little hollow in the foil between the layers of the carbon that you may as well just fill them with carbon and make a strong product and not have any issues where you could have separation of the top and the bottom skins. So they've been solid for a long time. They're resin infused under 6 tons of pressure. So it's a closed mold infusion process where carbon gets packed in there very tightly. There's up to 120 layers of carbon in the bowl alone. And under 6 tons, the mold's closed and gives us a very strong product. I'll give you a bit of a, I'm just going to try to give you a bit of a, these foils are sort of mid-production, you know, they're not finished yet. But I'll show you one that's finished, which is at the back of the room. This one here, for example, is a, can you see that? I hope you can. Let's see if I can pull this one into the so this is a Swift. Sorry, hope you guys can see that. Swift small, which has just been completed, which is a clear carbon finish. So that's a bit of a feature we do. Sorry, this is not a very good video. I'm trying to do it single-handedly while I'm talking to you. But basically, clear carbon finish is what we've sort of tried to really stick to, because it gives us no variation in surface finish. So out of the mold, they're just resin, and we try not to touch them too much, not to modify the surface, which is particularly important on the verticals where we're trying to keep the minimum thickness. Paint can be up to 0.8 of a mil thickness, so we try not to paint the verticals. Horizontals, you can do it. It's not as critical because you get more lift out of the foil by being a little bit thicker. But ultimately, yeah, it's a clear carbon finish. And then in terms of the tips, tip design, so the small, as you can see here, it's got a tip which is semi-fixed. Basically, the compromise of fixed tips is that you lose some control, and you also lose bottom range of the foils. So if you want early takeoff, you need the full flap to go down. If you have a fixed tip flap, half the flap is really staying in a neutral position, and the middle of the flap is really going down. So as a consequence, you lose some of the range and you lose some of the control. So there's a time and place, I think, for fixed tip foils. I think for us, the large foil, we felt that you could sacrifice the control because when it's light, you're not going to be flying out and crashing everywhere. So you can minimize the tip losses by having a fixed flap. But then on the small foil, which is designed to work uprange, I felt that you need that control to be able to survive and be fast in waves. So that's why there's a difference between the tip design between the small and the large. Another thing is the bent tips on the large foil. And what they do is they give you a bigger span for the effective span area. So what I mean by that is when you're leaning to windward, the tips of the foils come out of the water. And by bending the last 15 mil, it gives us essentially a bigger span without the downside of having that tip out. And that's particularly a problem on a large foil, which is quite wide. So again, that's quite a difference between the small and the large in that design. So they're both not only areas optimized for different conditions, but control features are optimized between the foils as well. And that's why I'm sort of having two foils that can address both the area requirements and also the control requirements for the given wind.
Yeah, nice, Luca. I mean, I've always run a fixed tip on my big foil because, as you say, you generally don't get much sea state when there's sub 15 knots, depending on the venue. And likewise, been nervous to have a fixed tip small. Perth was a bit of an exception. Slingsby was obviously running a fixed tip small foil and making it work really well for him. But the Swift small has got such a small tab at the tips anyway that there probably isn't too much movement there anyhow.
That's why that was exactly why I designed that. So the problem with a typical tip flap is that it's quite wide at the tip. So it produces a lot of lift at the end of the foil, which is exactly where you want to clean the lift, reduce the lift being generated. So yeah, the small has a tapered flap for that very reason.
Yeah. All right, Luca, listen, thank you very much. I'm going to move on to Kyle now because I want to very conscious that we've got David Mcdermott here also at the end of the call, which we want to have a good chat with. But we could talk to you for hours, informative as ever, and we'll try to get back to you on another day. So we'll talk to you again, Luca. Thank you very much. So Kyle Stoneham, are you there?
Yes, I am, Robert. Hello.
Hey, mate, how are you? Tell us about where you are first. Tell us about where you are first of all, and what's been going on in your life for the last week or two at your Moth camp.
Yeah, well, I'm practicing for the Moth Worlds in Spain. So been locked down for almost 2 weeks now. So obviously no sailing. But
so you shipped your boat down to Spain to sail at Pro Vela, is that right?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it's a glamour location for winter training in the Northern Hemisphere. Pretty reasonably flat water, good breezes, nice climate, good venue to launch from and sail out of, and about 20 other Moths there this year as well. So works really well for this training at the beginning of the season before you go to the regattas. Obviously this year is quite an exception with the sort of crisis that everyone's going through. So Spain acted fairly early, and we've been in lockdown for almost 2 weeks now.
Yeah, full on. Anyways, that's a bit of a shame for your sailing, but it's what we're dealing with at the moment. Anyway, bring us up to speed on the Moth Worlds. Obviously, it's a forever changing world. You're key in organising the whole event. Let us know where we're at. I'm sure everyone's anxious to know.
Yes, sure. Well, if you talk about it in probability terms, the probability of the Moth Worlds going ahead in September in the UK is neither likely nor unlikely at this point, I think would be fair to say. There's obviously determining factors with a hell of a lot of variables to give a lot of possible outcomes on whether or not the event can happen. We do have time for the variables to become more defined, which will give a much clearer picture. The question is, how much time do we have, and when does that call need to be made? I've already been speaking to the International Class Association to come up with a date by which that decision should be made. And of course, the factors that must be taken into account when you make that decision. For example, specifically for you guys, ability for competitors to travel from international countries must be known at the point at which they need to arrange a shipping of their boats. Is it by sea freight or air freight that we need to base that time decision on? Also, for example, will there be any quarantine protocol on people or goods entering the UK during August? Another factor. Obviously, this is based on it being safe at that point, which may or may not be the case. If it's not, then it makes everything I've just said irrelevant anyway. But what we're doing as an organisation is planning in case it can go ahead, so that it can go ahead as well. No significant money is being spent at this stage, and I'd advise sailors and our sponsors to avoid committing anything that's not refundable without better indication that it will go ahead. Of course, once we get to the point that the decision has to be made, if at first instant, due to the factors I mentioned, the decision is to remove the world status from the event, then it would be scaled down to a UK Nationals with a later review date applied using different criteria. So if it doesn't go ahead as a Moth Worlds this year, which could be the case, the 2021 Moth Worlds are scheduled for Garda. The question is, would the UK push in front, or would we go to the back of the queue, or would it just be a case of bidding again? I don't know the answer to that. One option, obviously, the global governments have on New Year's Eve is just to rerun 2020 and discard this year instead of rolling into 21, and that would solve quite a few of those issues.
That sounds like the answer. I get to be 39 again. Perfect. All right, Carl, thank you very much. So I think the answer is if it gets declassified from a championship, you're hoping there will be a big event in the UK in September, which obviously everyone's invited to, and obviously there is a chance that may not be able to go ahead.
Yeah, the one thing that we can be certain about at this point is the uncertainty in the situation.
Good one.
So, yeah.
All right, Carl, thank you very much. We'll move on to David Mcdermott here. Hopefully he can hear us wherever from New Zealand. You there, Dave?
You go, Rob.
Hey, Dave. Thank you for joining us. And sorry, Federico, can you maybe silence? Firstly, well done at the JJ. 3 JJs in a row there now. Talk us through that quickly and why you've been so dominant in that class for the last good few years now.
Yeah, it's a good question. I've been sailing 18-foot skiffs for about 10 years now. I've done 9 JJs, which is probably a little of the reason why I've learnt where to go and what to do in Sydney Harbour. I'm sailing with 2 guys, Brad and Matt. We've done 5 JJs together now. So, you know, the 3 of us together is probably a big key of why we're doing so well. We've actually performed quite well in the last 5. We came second by 1 point 5 years ago, and then had a little bit of a rules dilemma 4 years ago, which ended up with us getting disqualified for 1 race, which meant we didn't win it. And then last 3 years, yeah, we've not dominated, but you know, we've come away with the wins.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly watched at least half the regatta this year, and it was pretty dominant. I felt it kind of looked to me as though if you were ever put under pressure, you could always step away. And although the points gap probably didn't really show that how far ahead you were.
Yeah, we had a really good start to the last regatta. We got our advantage at the start. Our winning group, they just started sailing together again. So halfway through the regatta, they learned how to sail together and sail the boat. And from then on, it was pretty even contest, but we already had that points gap, so they got us through.
Yeah, and sail-wise, I mean, I spoke to you during the event, and you said that your sails are now mainsails are 3 years old. From off the boat, it looked like it does look as though you have a deeper setup, but I was surprised you've actually got a slightly straighter leach than a lot of the boats, and certainly the winning group, who has looked a bit more twisty. The biggest question I've been asked is, which I would say even a non-experienced skiff sailor would say, is your spinnakers do look different to everyone else's. Are they, or are they just trimmed differently?
Yeah, downwind we seem to have a little advantage from time to time. I'm not sure if they're different or not. I don't really know what the Aussies are running. Yeah, yeah. I don't think they're trimmed different. You can only really trim a kite. You can set them up a little bit different in terms of luff length, and we put the sheet block, but it's all pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah, no, sure. I haven't looked into anything in detail, but I suspect the mold shapes are similar. And as you say, I suspect you're running a slightly shorter luff length on it, which is giving it that flatter appearance. But it's either way, it's working well for you. Anyway, back to why we're all here. The Mackay Moth. Tell us about the journey, and hopefully you've got some photos you can share with us, and talk us about the journey. And obviously Jane's got it all going, but you guys are going strong with it now.
Yeah, well, I've been working at Mackay Boats for 10 years. I actually replaced James at Mackay Boats. So James used to work at Mackay Boats for 3 years. 10 years ago, he decided to leave to go to do America's Cup stuff, and I was sailing 49ers at the time, and I actually owed Dave and Owen money for some sales that I couldn't pay back. So I ended up working there as a short-term solution to my financial problems, and it never left. So yeah, it's worked out well. Been at Mackay Boats. James went off and did his America's Cup stuff. When he returned, he wanted to settle down with his family and whatnot, so he started up the Beacon Moth with Riley, Scott, and Paul. And I think he got 9 boats on the water, working out of his shed. And then a couple of things changed in his personal life, and I've been mates with James since school, so being mates, we're always in contact, and just came to the natural conclusion, and that'll be a great fit for him to bring the beaker into Mackay boats, which happened. It's been a really good fit. We've kind of put our Mackay boats production systems into the beaker, which is showing good results at the moment.
Great. I mean, you must be hugely happy with how the boats have been going. I'm sure your order book's full. We've seen a lot. Well, since the boat hit the water, we've seen quite a few changes. Solid wings and deck fairings, and can you talk us a bit through the evolution of the boat and where you see it going next, and and how production's coming along?
Yeah, well, when we first started, he came last July. James came into Mackay boats, and we basically just put it in the shed and had a good look at it and decided what the first thing that we wanted to do. And apart from formalising the production techniques and whatnot, was the solid wing. So he came up with a system to get a solid wing on. It was just an 8mm solid carbon foam sandwich. So we got that on. That was really well received by Scott, who got the first boat. And then the next step was the deck fairing. And I think the deck fairing was the biggest performance gain that's happened to the boat since it was first launched.
Can you share your screen, Dave, with some of those photos you show? I don't know if you...
Yeah. Can you stop sharing your screen?
I think I've paused it. No, it's come off pause again. I'll just go complete stop.
So this is the first boat we've built at Mackay Boats. That's with the solid wings and the deck fairing. We reduced the mast post height down to 250 mils as well. Actually, we put that back up to 300 just because the boats are going so fast through the water upwind and generating so much vang load. There's just not enough mast posts there.
Yeah, I'll just make a comment there as well. Is what we, I think this might even be Scott's boat, was the first grey one that came over. And when the beaker originally came, there was this big effort to sort of push the centre of effort lower, and people are talking about 5-metre mast. One thing we have realised is that the maximum luff length is good. So all the sails now are being produced at 5.185, or really trying to push that max luff length, because we're seeing that as a gain, and actually getting the centre of effort lower by making a bigger DS rather than just shortening the mast. We're trying to keep the aspect ratio as high as possible. So it does now seem, with the shorter king post, the 260, it was like a mast of 5050, but now, as Dave's saying, they've popped that king post up another 40 or 50 mil. It's back to a 5-metre mast for the Mackay boat. Sorry, you carry on.
Yeah, absolutely. We also changed with the solid wings. We had to rearrange the control systems because they couldn't run inside. The take-ups couldn't run inside the fabric tramps. So we created what we call an end plate in the middle of the boats, just a central control system that all the control lines come back through the bottom of the mast posts, where we had a 8mm pin that all the control lines are shackled onto. Travel back to the end plate and then out to the wings, through the top of the wings, which you can see in there. Through the top of the wings, down through little ferrules, and then back into the central control plate. And then we ran all the take-ups underneath a little hood that we put on top of the deck. All of the boats at last Worlds were running the system. Now we have changed the latest update with a little bit of feedback from Kyle Langford, is we have, sorry, I'll go back one more. This works, sorry, the old setup works really well, except for we've got 16 meters of control line running through the airflow. So obviously the bigger boat's all about aerodynamic drag and reducing that. So we thought of another way to try and run these control lines to reduce aero by taking these 8 control lines, well, these 8 ropes, so 16 meters of rope out of the airflow. To do that, we've rearranged, we've got rid of the central plate and just have these little control sheaths just glued to the deck. And then we run them up to a carbon plate glued on the tramp with all the cleats and control lines on it. Then the control lines go up to the top and they actually travel back down through the middle of the 8mm solid wing. So if you have a photo from underneath, sorry.
I see. So your control lines are returning in the core of the wing, essentially.
Correct. Yes.
Got you. And you know, your big push here, or the big push always with this boat, has been, you know, aero drag reduction. So you're going to the point of thinking these control lines are causing me too much drag. I'm going to try to hide them away.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said before, there's 16 meters of 3 or 4mm control line in the airflow. So that's more than all of your rigging added together or anything. It was a lot of rope.
Yeah. And presumably those cleats sit underneath the foot strap to, again, hide them away as well.
Yeah, correct. Yep. Yeah, so you can see the control line traveling up through the top of the wing and then back down through inside the wing. And then if you have a look on this photo, bottom left-hand corner, the 4 control lines travel in through the side of the hull into the center of the boat there onto another little carbon plate. And then all the take-ups travel back underneath the deck. So you can see in the middle of that photo there, we can't see the control lines. You can access them through you take the back beam off and you access.
Okay, so that boat has essentially got a second skin. There's a dummy floor in there, and you've got all your control lines underneath. And
the channel going in the middle.
Right. So the downside is, as you say, access to those control lines if you have a twist or break a bungee or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The bungees, we run the bungees all from the pin at the front all the way to the back to a turning block, and then back to the take-up block.
Got you. So anyway, tell us about build schedule and, you know, orders and what you've got going on there. Obviously, I know you're in shutdown at the moment.
Yeah, New Zealand's just gone into a 4-week shutdown. We're just working frantically to try and see what that actually means for our build schedule. We've got a lot of, we've booked out to Moth until about August. We're building 2 boats a month. So yeah, I'm just working through what it actually means to our current orders, what this shutdown means, and how long it goes for. 4 weeks. 4 weeks we can deal with. If it carries on past 4 weeks, we're going to start having to delay orders and whatnot. Obviously, if the worlds are on or not, that's a big factor as well. So yeah, we've just started. We only got told on Tuesday that we're going into lockdown, and it's Thursday now.
And so the other question I do have for you, which I think happens now, shipping the hard-winged boat in a box. What's your shipping box size, and you know, how much can you get in? I didn't really take a good look at the guys who are shipping their boats around, but tell us what you know.
The box was originally designed obviously without hard wings, and it was designed to be as small as possible to save on shipping costs. We've just done we've just shipped Tom Tom Burton's new boat with the hard wings. We actually made a lid that was 300 millimeters high, so just a higher lid, and that lets you fit the solid wings in there. That's if you want a bigger box. If not, we just normally ship the solid wings as a separate package, so you just have 2 packages on the same consignment.
Got you. So going to a regatta, boat and wings in one box, and then you take the trampolines on the plane with you.
You could do that. They're 900 by 900 when they're packaged up, and they weigh about 1.6 kilos. So
yeah. All right.
Want to do that.
So, but as you say, the other option is a higher sided box to get the trampolines into.
Yeah, and that gives you more room for spare room.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the feedback in Perth was that the hard tramps are better, but that said, Kyle was on soft tramps. But is this Kyle's new boat, this one we're looking at?
No, this is Tom Burton's boat. Kyle's is exactly the same. We just did 2.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, so that's TB's boat on his way. I mean, there are obviously plenty of new beakers arriving into Sydney all the time. What else is going on? What are you doing foil-wise at Mackay? I know that you brought out a new rudder you had in Perth. Is that right? And yes, and a few other bits coming along.
Yeah, before Perth, I think it was only 3 weeks before Perth, we got our new tool for the small rudder. We sold it for 1 day, I think, and it was positive feedback, and then sent 5 or 6 to Perth, and they all performed really, really well. So that, we're pretty happy with that. That was our first foil that we've designed and taken into production at Mackay Boats. So just working with a local supplier as a machinist with solid aluminium tooling. We didn't prototype, we just went straight to production. Our point of view in terms of prototyping is, the tolerances between a good foil and a bad foil is so small that we're kind of at the point of view that to prototype something is almost a waste of time because you don't get the final product. And also, if you prototype, it's pretty much half the cost of the real thing. So so it makes it quite hard to justify to prototype like a horizontal. So we just go straight to production tooling. Doesn't work, then we lose twice as much on tooling basically.
Yeah, and I guess luckily these days tooling costs are becoming more reasonable. So it's fingers crossed you get it right.
We've got a machinist just down the road. He hadn't machined foils before, but we schooled him up. We've obviously machined a lot of foil tools at Mackay Boats. We produce foils for 9 or 10 classes. Got a pretty good name in it. So we've just got a local supplier.
And how involved is Paul Beaker now?
Very.
Very.
Paul loves it. He's buzzing on the side, just working away on little developments, and always got new ideas and whatnot.
Good. All right. Well, thank you, David. We're getting close to the end of our time here now, and so thank you for joining us. Is there anything else you want to just let us know about the boat or what you've got in the pipeline for it for the next few months or for the rest of this year?
Yeah, well, we're working on a couple of developments. We've got a new gantry mold there just to push the rules a little bit harder to take out to the sides of the hull. Obviously, being in shutdown and with a full order book, we're probably going to be quite busy once we're allowed to back at work. So, we're just going to have to prioritise what we work on and what we need to do.
So tell us about that gantry again. What are you planning?
At the moment, our gantry finishes 30 mils inside the hull. When we're in Perth, there was a couple of boats with them out to the extremities of the hull of the transom. If you're looking at it from the back, our understanding of the rules was slightly a little bit different. So we're just pushing that gantry out to the extremities of the hull. So it just cleans up the airflow.
There is a big grey area in the rule regarding gantry and how it can attach, and then this 30 mil clearance. That will go round in circles for a bit longer, I'm sure. But it's good that it's good that you developing and and pushing it all. Certainly, you know, I think upwind, the Beaker has got wheels, downwind it's fast as well. Obviously, people do say they are a little bit harder to sail, and I think that's through having a slightly smaller tramp. Certainly, there's less wing at the back of the boat when you're coming out of a high-speed tack. There's less surface to land on, and maybe the wings are a bit steeper for getting up. But those are all hurdles we've got to adjust to. You know, 10 years ago, for sure, we probably weren't thinking we were going to be doing, you know, dry laps around the course. So it's a changing world, and I'm sure in 10 years' time we'll be looking at, you know, all sorts of different things on these boats. Right, Dave, thanks very much. And what I'll do is just come back and we'll just talk about where we're at to. So for next week, guys, our plan is to have the CST spars. We've got Chris Dixon from CST and hopefully Clive Watts, who will talk us through, you know, hopefully in quite detail, the engineering of their new masts and all the bend tests, and where the, you know, essentially how to get the best rig for you. We've also got Rory Scott with us next week, and he'll be talking to us about sail design and where we've got to with, you know, with the current sails we're using, and really, you know, where we're planning on getting to with this year. We've got new sails out, and obviously everything we can do to help make boats go faster. I think now we've got a bit of a feel for how it's all going to work. I'll try to get the sort of topics out early in the week ahead of the next week's call, and then we can get some questions back and be a bit more planned. We're a bit more on top of the technology and all that. But everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I hope you found it useful, and feedback is always welcome. Thank you to Luca, Graham, Kyle and David for your time. All very useful input, and you know, everyone have a great week wherever you are, and hang in there. All the best.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so as Rob says, I inherited the Moth program back in 2014. Took over from the American loft that had been running it up to that stage. I started working with Rob at that stage, and we very quickly decided we wanted to move on to a 3D sail. From at that stage, certainly the KA sails that were big at the time, and most of the competitors, including the North sails at the time, were all a paneled monofilm type sail, very similar to windsurfing sort of technology. But we wanted to move on to a 3D sail to utilize the benefits of that, basically, which was in being able to use super lightweight films and the benefits of a 3D molded sail. And so in 2015 we produced the V7, which was a very successful sail. We sold a lot of them. Rob used it amongst others at both the Garda Worlds and the Japan Worlds, I think. And you know, that sail was pretty successful. It was a full height rig back in those days, you know, we towards the end of that, 3DL started to be replaced by 3DI, which forced us basically to look at moving into a 3DI product. And there's a lot of benefits in the 3DI setup and structure, which Flipper's going to talk a lot about later on. But the first sail we basically came up with was the VI7. As I say, Flipper's going to talk a little bit more about the 3DI product later on and how it's actually constructed. But we wanted to produce a sail that wasn't too rigid. One of the big benefits of 3DI is its how rigid this structure it is, a very stable structure. But with the Moth and the sort of nature of sailing those boats, we didn't want to produce a sail that was too rigid. So our first introduction was the VI7, which was a 3DI polyester sail. It was essentially the same mold shape as the 3DL V7 at that stage. Full height rig, and was, you know, a very good sail at that stage with certainly early liftoff, and the sail moved around a lot. Ultimately, what we started to learn was it was moving around a little bit too much, and was stretching a bit too much in the back and getting a bit deep at times, so getting a little bit draggy. So the upper end of the range, it was, you know, was starting to become a bit of a handful, certainly for medium and lightweight guys. So we looked to see what improvements we could make on that, which led us into the VI8 range. So if we can move on that one, Albert.
Rory, can I just say a couple of things? Yeah, from my, you know, memory, it's obviously, you know, a good few years ago now. The 3DL sail was a fast sail, but it didn't go up range that well. We were settling it on the CTEC 3B mast, which is a relatively stiff mast, and certainly in the 0 to 15 knots of wind, it was a good sail. Getting over 16 knots, it started to struggle a bit, but you know, it won a lot of regattas. The first 3DI, the polyester 3DI, I took to Bermuda in I can't remember what year it was, and actually Ben Payton used it, and he did well. He ended up 5th at the regatta. I think 3DL won the regatta, but the first 3DI sail, he came 5th, and he was super happy with the sail, and you know, and that was literally without development, that sail. So out the box, it was a very good sail. But I always felt with the 3DL products that we struggled up range a little bit, and even putting a softer mast on the 3DL, we still wasn't quite as good up range as some of the other stuff. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of that was just how the sail reacted, you know, and on a stiffer rig. The 3DL being a pretty rigid structure as well, I think was the main thing for that. But the slide I'm showing now is, you know, we started to do a bit of finite element analysis on the sails, on the structures, and we could see on the sail on the left, which was the polyester sail, how much strain actually was going on within the structure. So there was, you can see all the areas up the back of the sail and down in the sort of lower leach area where this is basically the sail is growing. It's not strong enough in that area, so it was deforming there. So as it was getting windier, although it was moving around a lot, it was getting deeper in the head, and it was rounding up a little bit in the lower leach, and that's something we wanted to get away from. So the sail structure on the right was when we started to introduce some aramid into the sail as well, and that drastically improved the modulus and the strength of the sail. So in doing that, the sail flew a lot flatter in the head. It flew a lot straighter in the lower leach, and in fact, the load that you were putting on through the main sheet and the Vang and the Cunningham actually bent the rig a lot more, and prompted us, I think, a little bit to move into the softer mast, you know, area, because we needed to build in some sort of reaction in the sail, because the sail structure itself had become much firmer. I don't know when you first started pulling those sails up, Rob, but there was a big change, right, when you pulled that one up?
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we you know, from the get-go with the black sail, so to speak, we saw a big change, and then that, as you said, it pushed us down the softer rigs, and essentially we got to where we are now. Yeah.
So the prompt, obviously, if we move on, you know, this put us into the VI8 range, where we produced 3 sails in 2018, I think it was, early part. The full VI8 replaced the VI7, almost like for full height masts. At that stage, we introduced a low aspect sail, which lowered the center of effort in the sail a lot, and was a pretty quick sail downwind when we were uprange. and was quicker than the full height VI8 upwind. And we also started to get into the DS concept with the VI8 DS. At that stage, with the main sheets dropped where they were and our sort of first attempt at putting a deck sweeper on it, we were only a deck sweeper foot length of around 750 mil. But it did show us that there was, that there was some interest in that DS. I was a little skeptical about it to begin with, because there wasn't really a deck to seal against. And also you're bending the windward side of the sail round the boom. So undoubtedly downwind, when you're making the sail deep, that area of the sail looks pretty untidy and pretty, inefficient. But when you're getting it flat and you can do it nicely, then we actually started to see some benefit in it upwind. And actually it was, really quite a marked benefit. So yeah, if we move on there, Robbie.
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing to add there is there's been a big, over the years, obviously getting the centre of effort lower and lower in these boats has been a winner. First of all, we were cutting king post down, and now it's shortening the mast. People have always been worried about not having sail area in the optimum place, and that's where people were often sceptical on the deck sweepers, especially when they were small deck sweeper, being that you were throwing away sail area and it was not efficient sail area. And I think, it was only really until within the last year that that's all been answered, and actually seeing how efficient it is. And the big changes, a big reduction in drag, and then letting yourself go to that next stage of boat speed upwind. So back to you, Roy, we'll look at these mold shapes.
Yeah, so this was the evolution of the mold shape. So as I said, that when the structure became a lot firmer, a lot more rigid, we were flattening the top of the sail a lot, and it was becoming very, very straight exit down low. So the mold shape had to change quite a lot. So we can see from the VI7 on the left, the most of the VI8 had a very similar shape, but you can see the shape is much further up in the sail. There's a lot more broad seam. There's nearly double the broad seam in the sails. So much deeper molds, more luff curve in general to accommodate the softer rigs, that we needed to use a softer rig with a much more rigid sail. Luff curve became a lot more even in distribution, rather than the VI7, which was very bottom loaded, and with broad seam as well as the luff curve in it. The section shapes became rounder aft, so we were building shape into the back of the sail. At that stage, we felt that the DS sail was going to be our sort of uprange sail. So that sail was actually a little bit flatter than the VI8 and the LA. That's what we were using, and very quickly people moved away from the VI8 as the sail of choice. They were either LA or DS for a little while. I think you used an LA for a little bit, Rob. Was that the Aussie Nationals or something like that, where you were?
Yeah, I had one of the first LAs there, and a lot of that was because we were trying to push it down the one mast length of 5/100, not having to have this situation where you're dropping between two masts, one at 5/270 and one at 500, always with the aim of trying to get this DS working on the 5/100 mast, because we knew certainly at 16 or 17 knots of wind, DSL was going to be fast. And as things have evolved, obviously that wind speed's come way down. But one thing on that VI8, we know now that that's still a very valid mold, and sub 9 knots of wind, that sail is very potent.
Yeah, for sure. It's the first sail that gets you out of the water and gets you going around the racetrack. So if you had a light air venue, I don't know, Japan or somewhere like that, then I could see people going back into down that route rather than the shorter rig length. But moving on, this the DS sail did start to really make us think a little bit about it. So we started to model the DS in flow, and we did start to see the real benefit of making that DS section as big as possible, basically. Certainly upwind, in order, as you say, to, you know, if we can get the induced drag off the bottom of the sail, get that bigger, you know, it turned into quite a substantial boat speed increase. It's not what you would do if you were just designing a sail for your downwind stuff all the time, but it's certainly upwind where your apparent wind speeds are pretty bloody high. It was making a big difference. So that prompted us to really, you know, have a look at what we could do in order to maximize the deck sweeper part of the sail without prohibiting the guys to actually, you know, you still got to get around the racetrack, you've got to get under the boom, and you've got it around the back of it and things. So that's what sort of took down the VI9 route. But I think, you know, I think in order to push that, you know, if we were putting a lot more area into the deck sweeper, you know, we increased it from 750 on foot length to 1250, which is a fairly major change and quite a lot of sail area taken away from the sail. We took the decision to make the sail a bit deeper in order to help push it back down the range a little bit, or move the, you know, the point where it became strong, move it down a little bit. We also looked at just refining the luff curve a little. We took a little bit out of the very head of the sail, and we took out a little bit in the very tack, and that tidied up the leeward side of the luff sleeve nicely, which helped just, you know, improve the efficiency and reduce drag in the sail. So that's ultimately the sail that Rob and Tom had at the Worlds in Perth.
Yeah, I mean, there was probably 10 of them there at the Worlds, and you know, we haven't changed that mold shape since Perth. We've made a few geometry changes since Perth, i.e. the deck sweeper portion's got a bit bigger, but the you know, the feel very much was when we went to the DSX sail, as Rory was saying, when we went to the DSX sail, we wanted to make the sail a little bit deeper, just so it's got a bit more range in it. And one thing, you know, one thing, the sails get flat enough. There's no problem with getting the sail flat enough. And I think what can happen in the Moth class quite easily is that people get their sails overly flat and then they become unresponsive. You run out of all the luff round and essentially the whole thing's locked up. So I think it's, you've got to be a bit cautious about getting overly flat. I know the boats are hugely overpowered upwind and people are always thinking, I've got to get my sail flatter, I've got to get my sail flatter. But there are inherent problems if you do go make the sail too flat. The boat can become difficult to sail, and actually you can increase drag on the whole thing. What we're going to do now is we're going to just scroll on one, Albion. We're going to cross over to Flipper here, who's going to tell us a bit about 3DI and the material we use in the Moth sail.
Yeah, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Thanks for joining this webcast. I'm just going to spend a few minutes touching on 3DI and actually the, you know, the structure of 3DI. You know, everyone on this call, you're all off trades in some way or form, and I'm sure you have a pretty good understanding of composite construction. And 3DI is 3DI Raw and 3DI 360, very simply, is a flexible filament-based thermoset pre-preg system. So it's no different to your hull or to your mast, except we use a flexible resin system, which enables the sail to be deformed, rolled, bent, but it's using exactly the same technology as the hull of your boat. Got the next slide there. So this short video that's going to play for about 30 seconds just gives you an overview of what 3DI is and how it actually is formed, the steps we use. We use robotics the whole way throughout the production process, and we we just go through these multi-stages of laying up various of a sail, and each sail is engineered and the structure is engineered specific to the application. This video you're seeing here is giving an indication of a one reef mainsail with the various components being laid down step by step. You can see each of the robotic layers coming down. There's the reef structure in purple going on. Top reinforcements of clue tack patching. Then the molds inflated, vacuum bagged, heated and cured. Got the next slide there. So the latest DSX mainsail, there's here's a screen image which I will just allow you just to read some of the key points in. This is a summary of the structure compactly in the latest DSX sail. So the total mass or the weight of the sail membrane is just on 2.3, nearly 2.4 kilos. It's a spread filament pre-preg thermoset adhesive system. Flexible resin system, so you can deform it, you can fold it, you can crunch it. The total number of tapes that I'll be showing you, actually the inner workings of this structure, there's 473 meters of tape in the base membrane, which is made up of 515 individual tapes. The composite is basically a blend between 66% of an aramid polyester hybrid and then 33% pure polyester, which we use on the exteriors. And then we have about 1% of what we call a non-woven remay substrate, which we use for locating calibration marks and just kind of style tracks. And the key to the 3DI structure is the end sail is three-dimensionally molded. So these two images here, the image on the left, North Sails, we're very proud of our technology. We build all our own pre-preg tapes for every 3DI sail that we build globally. We have two pregger lines, one in Minden, Nevada, for big boat sails, basically sails over the side of, let's say, around a 60-foot boat or a 20-meter length overall boat. And then in Sri Lanka, we have another pregger line which does everything from one design up through TP52 type size up to that 60-footer. And then on the image on the right is our own robotics. We design, engineer, manufacture all our own robotics for our process. The image there is one of our tape laying heads, which takes those pre-preg tapes and then lays them down. The pre-preg tapes, the same as the manufacture of your boat, they need to be stored in a refrigerated container and on standby for each of the custom orders that go through the factory. So this next image gets into the nitty-gritty of the structure within the sail. So the Moth sail that we're talking about, the DSX, has 13 individual layers involved. So starting on the right, the purple layer there is a polyester exterior. It's a what we call a leach group polyester exterior. The next one, the light green, is a leach strainer. That's where we first start stepping into aramid, where we want some load. Third one along is getting into the leach structure, clue to head. We're addressing the loads as you sheet on, as you bang on, and being able to support the loads the whole way up from the clue through the mid leach up into the head. Next along is what we call a luff structure, bias luff structure. That's starting to address the loads that are coming out of the Cunningham area and going up diagonally up through the sail to each of the batten pockets. The grey one coming along next, I think, is starting to get fairly self-explanatory, I hope. That's the batten detail. That's what we call the strainers for the battens, which are taking care of the compressive loads that the battens are putting on the sail membrane. The next two small, the yellow and the magenta coloured ones, they're the port and the starboard side of the batten pocket. So we're actually inside to, I believe, layers 6 and 7 by this stage. They're the either side of the batten pocket. And then basically we reverse the process as a general statement. Here comes the other batten strainers on the other side. And you can also see the detail of the reinforcing on the leech and the luff of the batten to address the loads. Then we come back again to the luff structure. Leech structure is the blue, so it's kind of the reverse of the third layer that I started with, but obviously all the tapes don't actually overlay with each other. They all intersect with each other to give complete coverage over the sail. The next one is quite a good one, and maybe Albie, if you can get your pointer down in the Cunningham area, this crimson coloured red one is showing the edge reinforcing the whole way around luff head foot, but the Cunningham really attending to the incredible loads that you guys are putting on the Cunningham, and Chris from CST is going to be addressing this. So we have the ability to engineer the structure and really put the right materials where we need it to address the loads. So second last layer is actually what we call a compressive layer. We're back to 100% polyester on this layer. It's an external layer again, and that's the one that's dealing with the compressive loads on the sail, addressing what Rory was talking about as an example, the difference between an all polyester sail and an aramid sail. We need the aramid structure to support the sail and support the loading you guys are putting on it. But this compressive loading actually keeps everything kind of in place and keeps the sail millimetre perfect in its flying shape. So there's no distortion, there's no loss of area as you're sailing and sheeting on. And then very, very last is actually a rose layer that we put on. It's what we call the trim lines. So we just put a non-woven remade surface around the outside, and then all those little black dots that you can see, they're all the robotic markings. So when we go to take these sections, put them on the 3D mold, we have very, very accurate laser controlled identifiers to ensure every sail is identical. So here, just a couple of pictures. This is our one of our facilities in Sri Lanka. This is a dedicated One Design 3DI, one of the many 3DI One Design robotic centers. So here you can see this is actually was a polyester test sail we were doing for calibration for the DSX, and you can see the various components here. That one that the pointer is on at the moment is that bottom section. So we go from these flat sections, if you can go to the next slide, then the sections are draped over the mold using those identifiers. You'll see the gentleman on the left, the operator, he's actually calibrating all those identification marks to make sure that we're millimetre perfect. Then a vacuum bag goes over the top. Just go to the last slide, please, Abby. Vacuum bag over the top, sucker down and apply heat. We cure the sail on the mold, and then it goes straight off the mold and goes onto a post curing floor, a flat floor that's humidity controlled. And then once it's actually completed its kind of green time into cured state, we then go off into the finishing floor, and the sail makers do all their magic. I think that's it.
Great, Flipper, thank you very much. And I think what it shows, you know, the process we use to build a sail is pretty full on. Firstly, sort of sailor feedback to Rory Scott in the design office, designing the sail, working through with the computer software, to the guys designing the structure, and then out to the guys who are actually building the mold. And then obviously that mold goes to finishing, luff tube going on, and all of that. So the stages and the technology involved in the whole thing is fascinating, really. All right, Flipper, thank you very much. We're just moving on a bit to now a bit more detail on the 2020 sails, the DSX. As we've touched on a lot already in this webinar, is this DS, and again in the last year or two, it's amazing where it's come from in terms of quite small DSs, sort of above a foredeck. We've now got, obviously on the right here, the beaker boat, which is very much designed around having a deck sweeper sail. Just you can see there the most right hand shot is a very nice looking DSX with the deck fairing underneath, so fully end plated. Some of the details we've tried to put into this new deck sweeper. If you go to the top left picture here, you can see we've got these Velcro upstands, and these are to connect the two skins of the deck sweeper. Firstly, to make sure that they can't move independently, but also to adjust the width between them, so you can actually add some shaping. They're spaced fore and aft along the deck sweeper, so you can actually add some shaping in. And you can see in the middle picture, we've obviously got the diagonal batten, which runs into the wadding of the very bottom horizontal batten. And we've also got the two horizontal battens, which just to try to help create some shape into this deck sweeper, give it some rigidity, and make sure that it's really creating an aerodynamic shape. One of the things that we found has been very useful is the zip up the back of the deck sweeper, which actually holds the two skins together, and it stops them shearing when the boom goes in and out. And that is one of the things we found made a big difference. And in Perth, we were fitting a lot of zips to a lot of sails. All right, if you just go on to the next one, Albie.
Hey, Rob, just if I can interrupt just 1 second. There's a good question from one of our viewers here asking about luff pocket material and distortion coming out of luff pockets, and what are our thoughts on that, and is there any development in that area?
Yeah. So on the luff pocket.
Thanks for the question, Fetty.
Yeah. Fetty, thanks. On the luff pocket, obviously, you know, it is always a very difficult task. We're trying to bend a sail around a mast which is changing shape a lot. So at some stages there are creases. We've gone back to a purely Dacron pocket, and if Rory's there, he'll probably better butt in on this. But we did have a Teflon front to it, which was good, but maybe the wear on it wasn't ideal. But we're very happy with the Dacron pocket. I think we can generally get it to set up very smoothly. Obviously, around deck sweeper areas, it is, you know, you can get creases, and that's constantly evolving how we get that perfectly fair around there. But we're very happy with the cloth we're using at the moment. I'm not exactly sure of the weight of it, but
it's a 3/8 polypreg, 3.8 ounce 3 polypreg Dacron, Rob.
Yep.
So it's cut on the roll of cloth so that it's at its strongest straight up the luff. So when we're pulling down hard on the cunning on the new, you probably actually see it in that right hand picture there, we're actually pulling on the sleeve now as well. So it has some strength in the direction of the mast essentially. And then it's actually the way it's woven, it's trying to be as soft and as supple in every other direction as possible to try and pick up some of the range of mast bends that we make this this sail go through.
And one thing we've done, Rory, over the years, we've certainly tested a lot of materials on the luff tube, done the full circle on it a couple of times.
Yeah, exactly. And we're back to really using the same stuff as we started out, and I think across the range it goes pretty well. We've tried cutting it in different angles, trying cutting it on the bias and stitching it back together, but it was never as successful.
Absolutely.
getting the luff curve back out of it down low and up high on the 9, and careful shimming of your cams means that you can generally get that. If you get it set up nicely, you can get it pretty smooth most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't see any issues that we need to address in the luff tubes at the moment, especially in the 2020 DSXs. Even around the whole deck sweeper area, it's really beginning to look very, very fair, which is nice. Albie, sorry, can you just go up one slide? Other way, mate. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about, I forgot to talk about the size of the deck sweeper. And, that this has basically gone from 750 millimeters to now 1250 from the very front of the luff tube. And in Perth, Tom Slingsby used a deck sweeper at 1 meter and 50, so 1050. So we've come 150 mil bigger since Perth. I've sailed with this sail at the States, and it was good. It was a really good sail. This is the 1250 deck sweeper I'm talking about. The reason why, we've felt that as soon as we've gone bigger on the deck sweeper, the boat's gone better and better. And then obviously following on from Perth, we're like, right, we've got to go to the next jump right away is doing a bigger deck sweeper. So we made the decision to jump straight to 1250. That way, just to avoid a 50 millimeter incremental change every year, which the feeling was that was just going to, get annoying if that every year we just went 50 mil bigger. So we've made the jump to 1250. It's obviously main sheet drops further back in the boat and main sheet hanger on the boom a bit further back. But it's very, very achievable, and sailing it has been no dramas. So, the aim was there to get it done in one hit rather than doing it bit by bit, bit by bit. All right, thanks, Albie. We can roll on. Yeah, so this is, well, just go back up one more, sorry. Just want to talk about the difference between the, so on this slide here, the Beaker sail on the left, the BI9, and the Exocet Mach 2 sail on the right, the VI9. The sails are identical, the mold shape's identical, the deck sweeper size is the same. The differences are just in tack detailing. The Beaker uses a slightly shorter mast, and this is because the king post is slightly longer. So the tack of the mainsail inside the deck sweeper itself is slightly higher, so that it doesn't crash into the boom. And then likewise, because the Beaker has got a fatter king post, we've made a Velcro patch around the front to basically, cater for this increase, essentially putting the fatter king post in, sucks away a lot of luff around there. So we need to, fair the sail in around that king post. So there's a larger cutaway under that Velcro, and then the Velcro just covers over the area. And on the VI9 on the right, you can see there's just a nice cutaway for the sail to, come around the foredeck and then blend in nicely. You can see the Cunningham webbings on the sail there, which are identical on both sails. Obviously on the Beaker sail, it's just hidden underneath the Velcro. And if you just go on to the next one, Albie, we'll just look at that. Kind of not that we're going to talk about it. So we're using one Cunningham system to do inside and outside. Here, this is the most complicated system with hooks on the inside and outside, but you can get away with just hooks on the outside. That Cunningham system's available on our website. This is set up by Alex Heyman, and if you look at the North website, you'll see that Cunningham system on there, and feel free to copy it. All right, that's sort of bringing us to the end of the bit on sales. We're now going to go to Chris Dixon, who's going to talk us through CST masts and his new TowPro range of masts.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having us on the webinar. It's good for you guys to organise this and get the Moth community together and others, I guess. But today I just want to cover sort of three main areas, really. We'll give you a bit of a background on CST. A lot of people know CST, but we'll fill in some of the gaps. And then why, you know, we've changed to this TowPro mask setup, and then we'll cover a bit more detail about it. So CST, we've been in business 25 years this year, which is a great milestone to reach. I've been part of the business for coming up to 20 years this year, so it's been a long slog, but we've got two factories based in Sydney, and we'd be probably 90% export. We started in the marine industry 25 years ago because that was really our passion, and we had a lot of enthusiasm to start making composite products for the marine game. And over the years, we diversified into automotive, aerospace, defence, and industrial products. We produce roughly probably 2,500 tubes a week at the moment, which we convert into up to 130,000 parts a week of varying types. So we've really managed to scale up over the years to get the volume up. Rob, if you want to change to the next slide there, Albie. These are some of the customers that we deal with across the range, from sailing to automotive to aerospace. You know, having customers like this really sort of force us to develop really good quality systems so we can control the products that we're sending out to them and get really good consistency and reliability. We go to the next one, Albie. With the marine, we've won many world titles over the years. You know, our spars have won many world titles over the years. I think there's been 9 Moth Worlds now with our products, which we're pretty proud of. It's pretty cutting edge technology, the Moths, and we find that there's a lot of trickle down from our high-end sort of aerospace customers to Moths. There's a lot of sort of cross-pollination between the two sort of areas. We do a lot of different products ranging from dinghies to 50-foot keel boats. Over the last few years, we've really sort of forced ourselves to focus on building a lot of vertical integration into the business so that we could increase our capacity. We spent a lot of time building our own machines, so I suppose we've got a similar sort of methodology to North's. You know, we build our own winding machines, and we scale up the volume. So with the quality, this is a bit of a quick snippet of the quality system. You can see the graph down there with all the bar graphs. So every tube that goes through the system gets measured, weighed, diameter checks, depending on the customer specifications. Some get bend tested. The lower part of the screen there, you can see all of our data logging. So we've got humidity controlled rooms, temperature controlled rooms, oven curing, post curing. There's a specification for every product that goes through. There's a really tight specification, whether it be weight, diameter, torsional, you know, properties, and it's all built in. So it's a go, no-go system as the operators track each batch and they confirm the details. They get tolerances that will either pass it or fail it. You can actually see there's a red one there which has failed in the system. So it's really quite robust now. We understand our properties really well. So usually if there's something that goes wrong internally, or whether it's a fibre or a weight that doesn't match up, it gets caught in the system before it goes out to the customer, and that's really critical part of our business. The fibres, a lot of you guys have seen fibres over the past, whether you've done a bit of laminating yourself, but you know, they're quite common terminologies that are discussed amongst the industry: standard modulus, intermediate modulus, high modulus, ultra high. You know, the quality doesn't just go to our outgoing products, it's also got to do with our incoming products. So we have incoming inspections on all the raw materials. We have certain testing that we do. So we basically check our suppliers and make sure if they say they're going to give us 380 gigapascal fiber. They're giving us 380. You know, over the years, we've found there is a lot of variation there. So the beauty of our process is if we have a product that, so the fiber isn't 380, we can tune the patterns to match so that we get, you know, really good repeatability on our bends, which is important for the sail makers. I'm sure they'll vouch for that. And that gives us really one of our key strengths, I'd say, is understanding our fibers and being able to tune around those batches to give us a very repeatable product. Shall I flip to the next one, Halby? All right, so why did we change to go to this TowPro system? I suppose we had a good opportunity to change here. We'd had the last 3 worlds have been won by Paul Goodison with our DS series masts, so we had some really good runs on the board. The product was really good, but we saw a bit of a change coming through with like the sail technology, but as well as the sail designs, moving towards the deck sweepers. So we could see going forward that going shorter and shorter masts, you know, originally they were like 5350 masts, they came down to sort of 5100 or 5 meter masts. As the span gets shorter, the mast is inherently going to become stiffer. So we thought we have to go softer with that, and also lowering the center of effort sort of was indicating to us that the sails would probably need to go deeper as well because of the lower center of effort and need to produce some more power. So we thought probably with softer masts, we'd be able to get a bigger range out of the mast as well. I think when we went to change, it was maybe by luck that we sort of came across with Rob and the North team at the same time. They were changing their technology, and the opportunity to sort of develop the mast and the sail package together at the same time was probably the best integration package that we could do. So we went about, we changed the mandrel geometry from where we were at. The mandrels that we had before were, you know, probably 10 years old, and it was a geometry that was built for sails back then. We had a number of different sort of laminates that we'd had in the past. We changed from wet winding to a pre-impregnated tow, which is called TowPreg. So a few of these drivers also were driven by the ability, we wanted to be able to sort of tool up ourselves and create more capacity and more volume so we could respond quickly. So going to the TowPreg enabled us to do that. So we went from being able to sort of wind 1 mast a day through to doing up to 8 masts a day now. So it's a significant turnaround in terms of volume. We also saw an opportunity to change the fittings and the appearance of the mast. So we spent a lot of time starting from scratch, basically. We started with the DS2 was our base for the bend. We thought that was a pretty good sort of bend to start with the intention of going softer from there. So we redesigned the laminate and optimized our fiber layouts for compression as well as some torsional effects. And then we redesigned all the fittings. We understand that the loads, as it was going to get shorter, the loads were going to increase on the forestay fittings as well as the heel plugs. So we went to a metal combination, and metal's quite good. We've learned quite a lot through our aerospace partners about metal and composite interaction. So we thought this was a good opportunity to enhance that, and that also allowed us to upscale. We've got a lot of Akuma machine centers in our factory, so we had the ability to machine fittings quickly and hard anodize them, which would protect them from corrosion quite a lot. And so yeah, there was the other driver behind it was being able to swap between tips. And typically the masts that we'd made in the past were 1 base, 1 tip together. So it was quite expensive for the Moth guys. You'd end up with a DS2 and a DS4, and then you'd end up with a couple of sails. So we had a look across the range, and the base panels were we're very similar. We saw an opportunity to be able to swap tips, so we changed the manufacturing techniques so we could machine the joints now with a tapered lock joint. So that got rid of a lot of the slop. It also gave us a lot better repeatability between bases and tips. So we could now provide 2 or 3 tips, and people would be able to decide what tip they wanted and interchange them quite easily. If you just want to slide to the next one from there. Okay, so this is a little video. You can play that and I'll just talk while it's going. This was from our windsurfer development, which was a couple of years before the TowPro started, but this technology trickled into the TowPro. We have an opposition mast on the right-hand side and our windsurfer mast on the left-hand side. There've been some inherent issues with mast failures while rigging up on the beach. So our aim was to have the same stiffness profile and the same bend characteristics, but improve the toughness. So I think the mast on the right bent to 700 millimeters and 130 kilos. We managed to make the mast eventually go into production, bending at 1100 millimeters and breaking at 155. So that was the same sort of philosophy that we've gone with the TowPro mast. Optimize our fibers, optimize the mandrel technology, and also go with the same sort of joint designs that we did with the windsurfers.
So nice, Chris. So I think this next slide on the bend will be, most interesting to a lot of our Moth guys. So as you were saying before, your range now is fully interchangeable, so you can put whatever base with whatever tip you want.
That's correct. Yep. So when we first started this, we started with the deck sweeper masts, and we started with 2 lengths really, 5 meter and a 5100. And we had 2 bases and 3 tips. And what we didn't want to do, we didn't want to really sort of dictate to the market and say, oh, this is your option, and lock people in. We wanted to sort of say, well, here's 2 bases and here's a couple of tips with different bends. You guys go out and try them, because everyone has different techniques and different styles. And Rob based a lot of his developments around and really around trying the different tips and getting the feel for it, and then developing their designs around that. So it was giving more flexibility, I guess, is what we were trying to achieve by having tips available, and then a natural selection process came about.
And then, so just looking at this chart here, the DS2 was always the sort of pretty a good mast, not too stiff, but below that was DS1, which I think is what Paul Goodison used, and the DS0. It was certainly clear to me that Goody was going well using a much softer rig. And on this graph here, the CTEC 3B is actually the red line on the bottom, and I think the DS0 is the very top line. So it's quite a significant difference. So the lines go DS0 on top, DS1, and then DS2, then a 3C, and the red line being the 3B. So where we were, if we just go through put a timeline on it, with the 3DL sail and the CTEC 3B, we were a much stiffer combination with less luff round. And then we take it on to today, where we're running say a DS1, which is one of those top 3 lines, depending on what combination you use. So a lot more mast bend with a lot more luff round. And so, Chris, just tell us here then, your BV1 relates to what essentially what was the DS1?
Yes, yeah. So the bases, the BV1 and the TV1 were sort of effectively, similar to the DS1. The DS1 and DS2 were very similar in bends. There wasn't a lot between the two. But the BV1 and TV1 were typically the sort of standard there when the deck sweepers came out.
Got you. I mean, one thing I've noticed with your mask range is they are, you know, compared to other brands, it's a lot closer. When you change tip, it's not a significant difference. It's a subtle change, and I think that's often what's enough to make the change. It's just a very subtle change. Sorry. Then further down the line, I was using a BV half and a TV half at the Worlds, and those were available masks.
Yeah, they're available. So they're probably another sort of similar sort of step down between the blue and the black line. Then the BV 0.5 and the TV 0.5 will be the same step down again. So it's softer again than the BV1, TV1. Yeah. So I guess what we learned from the past with all the DS developments with Paul Goodison in the past and the other sailors was, you know, if we started making the increment too big between them, say like a DS2 and a DS4, that they'd end up just staying on the DS2 the whole time. So we ended up with these finer increments, and something that doesn't really show on a static bend test like that is really, you know, once it's in the sail and there's a lot of compression with the amount of luff round that you're running now, the compression really exaggerates a lot of the bend, and then that will show up whether it's more tip bend or mid bend. That'll show sort of a bit more under compression. So
absolutely. I mean, as you know, it's subtle changes. Albie, why don't you just move on to the next one? And I drew up this sort of equipment, you know, choice, because there's a lot of people out there with different body weights and trying to understand what to use when. And I think what we'll try to do is put this up on our website. But essentially, you know, at the Worlds, I used, you measure in 2 masks. So I used the B1, T1. And then when it got windier, I'm in the 75 to 85 kilo weight range. And I used the B1, T1 and the B half, T half. I had one sail, which was the DSX, which I used the whole time. I think now, you know, I guess that range, you know, for light air, I could be on a bigger sail, then I would need that longer mast. But I was using a relatively straightforward combination. I think if you were lighter, you could go to a slightly softer rig, again, depending on what sail you want to use. And then what I haven't put on here is obviously you can interchange those mast combinations. So sometimes I would use the B1 base with a T half tip. And I don't think the bases are too critical because you've got the spreader there holding it in place. So I think the base is slightly less sensitive. We'll keep moving on, so as we're going to hold up too much time. So Chris, just talk us through your new fittings quickly.
Okay, so like obviously all our fittings were carbon before. With the increase of load, you can see we tested, we've got an Instron testing machine here, so we set up jigs and break it. It's all sort of fed back and recorded. So the old carbon fiber forestay fittings used to take about 1,300 kilos. We then changed to metal, and we anodize all that sort of stuff in-house as well. So we went through a whole bunch of anodizing techniques to try and get the right combination. That then went up to 1,700 kilos when it was breaking the shackles, which was quite repeatable. And then we upped it up to about 2,100 kilos where it starts really ripping the laminate apart. So we haven't really sort of seen any of those failures. So yeah, that's the sort of short gist of the metal fittings. Adhesives are critical in gluing all these fittings on, whether it be main sheet hangers or forestay fittings. So, you know, we typically use Plexus, which is a great adhesive. It's a methyl methacrylate adhesive. And the benefit is it's got a great temperature range, as you can see up the top there, minus 55 to 121 degrees C. It's got a great range that it can go through. So that means that it won't go soft, it won't peel off the mast easily. It's also a little bit sort of, not foolproof, but you know, if you make mistakes putting it on, because it's a methyl methacrylate, it really it etches into the surface. and it'll sort of bond itself really well compared to an epoxy, which really needs great surface preparation.
So you're saying you use the plexus, not spar bond?
Yeah, we've done a lot of testing. Look, spar bond can be successful as well. I'm not saying it's not, but you know, there were some issues in Perth that we saw. Some people had fittings that had been glued on with spar bond that had come off, and you look at the TGs there, and I guess that comes down to really understanding the adhesives that you're going to use to glue things on, and the cure time, how long it takes for it to really go hard and reach the right sort of TGs, which is where it goes soft. So, you know, there's no point sort of gluing it on expecting to sail with it the next morning if it's a 45-degree day. It's not going to work. So, copy. You know, with all of our fittings that we glue on, we're using that product, and we've done lots and lots of testing, and I'm pretty confident with that. So, if you just want to flick to the next slide there. So, you know, I guess the first reaction of a lot of people is with aluminium fittings is corrosion. So we decided to sort of address this straight off the bat, and we built a corrosion chamber in-house, and we put all of our fittings in there. We put about 40 samples in there for about 4 weeks in an accelerated environment. And we had all sorts of different anodizing. So it's all hard anodized. But we had different techniques, so we tested that. The one on the right was one technique which didn't work, and you can see the one on the left which was in the same environment for the same amount of time, and that came out with virtually no corrosion on it. So with the
what fittings are you using in aluminium now? Just the shroud and the spreader?
Yeah, the forestay and the spreader. We've also got the male heel plugs, because with the most of the boats now are going to a female heel plug, where the male fitting is built into the boat. But on some of the older boats, the Mach 2s that have still got a female heel plug in the boat and a male heel plug in the mast, we've got a machined metal fitting in the bottom of that. So it's really about isolating the material, the metal from the carbon fibre. So we've got a number of techniques, but we've sort of, you know, tested it to make sure that works. So, you know, I think we've sort of really covered our bases there. If you flop to the next video or the next screen, this just gives you a bit of a sneak peek on some of the developments coming up. So we use a lot of our 3D printers just to rapid prototype parts. So this is like a lever bang that we're developing at the moment, which will have the pulley built into the end of it, which has been requested for a little while, but anyway, that should be the next couple of weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, we'll probably have that through the machining shop and into the testing lab.
So what's going to happen there then? In the top picture, you're going to glue on that plate onto the boom?
Yeah, so that's a metal, that's a metal saddle.
Right, that will be metal.
Yeah. So we'll be able to make it lighter, and it'll have a greater bearing strength than what we've got now, and it'll also be a lot smaller. Just a lot more streamlined on the boom. So that'll be for the top end, and then the bottom end will have the pulley system available with a high load sheave in it we'll test to make sure that they can take the loads. We still have some other boom fittings as well, new hangers and bang attachment points and that sort of thing that we're working on next week. So they should come through the system fairly quickly.
So are you doing a new boom? I've heard rumours.
We've had a new boom on the list for a very, very long time, and we keep flip-flopping back and forward. It really comes down to the development time. So the boom is one we've got 2 different designs that we've been looking at. We've been hanging off, and I'm not sure whether we're going to hit the go button on those yet.
Yeah,
we've got a really long development list, and that's one that'll take a fairly big chunk out of it. So at the moment, that one's still on hold.
And just on your masts, you know, essentially to customers, anything's possible in terms of stiffness. If they want something softer, it's possible.
Yeah. Look, we're always open to suggestions, and you know, I guess something that we've done with this, something that we didn't talk about with the mast, was we've standardized the layout a bit more now. The forestays moved up, 100 millimeters from 1700 to 1800, but we've sort of standardized the forestay and the spreader location. So that's going to make it easier for the sail makers. Hopefully it makes it easier for people so they don't have to have so many different rigging kits for different masts and different layouts. And
yeah, certainly what Slingsby had at the Worlds, where he had the sale of he had the option of running the long mast and the short mast. So he had one long base, and then so that meant he had the option of 2 tips on either rig height, which is the right way to do it. If you go to do if you want to run 2 rig heights, just have one long base and one short base with the same tips, and then you're well covered.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Excellent. Chris, thank you very much. And thank you everybody for joining us. I think that, there's a lot of information on there. This webinar will be available online. So please feel free to go back through it all. Shoot us any questions you need to ask. There's a lot to absorb there, but it's good to see that there's plenty of evolution going on, and we'll see where we get to this year. Thank you very much. And next week we've got Tom Slingsby talking about setting up the sail and how to make it go fast. So I look forward to seeing you all then. Cheers.